You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Red Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by, that's right, every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to talk about the news. We're Han Solo today, but we've got some really fun stuff to talk about. We've been out of office for a month, but we're back from China and ready to chat about the news. And also, it was great to see everybody at Impact. Thanks to everybody who had super kind words for us for the podcast. Seriously, it really means so much when people say that they listen to the show or love the show, or even that the show got them to change careers to be a planner. I heard that as well. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Almost made me cry, really. Seriously, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Sometimes, as I've mentioned a few times on the show, I feel like I'm talking into this microphone and in this room, but there's nobody around us. So I'm not sure where it goes, but it goes into your ears. And I really appreciate that when you guys tell me. It's super awesome. And also, as we do when we're Han Solo, we have some really great updates on upcoming and past episodes that we're chatting about recently. Let's see here. What do we got? I'm working on the Kingwood episode still. I have a draft script, as I mentioned before. I can't believe I have a script again, but we do. We have one. And then Sophia took a first cut at clipping all of the audio from the folks that we had as guests to do the show. So I have some audio. I have a script. All I have to do is record my side's voiceover for that, which takes a little bit of time. Voiceover is not the easiest thing in the world, but we'll be doing that soon, and hopefully we'll be out by the end of the year. That's my hope. I'm crossing my fingers. I know I've been saying this episode's coming out forever, but I feel like we've actually made some progress on it. So I've been telling people about Kingwood. I was at the Parking Reform Network party in Portland during Impact, and I saw Tony Jordan, and we are going to have him on the show soon too. And I saw City Nerd, and it was just really great. But I was telling him about Kingwood. I was like so excited to talk to Ray about Kingwood, which is really, that's just what I go to, is like, he was telling me how he's been to Houston and he liked it. And I was like, well, you should go check out Kingwood, Texas. So anyways, I think you guys will like it too once we come out with the episode. I think it's really interesting, fascinating background stuff on bikes, on city building, on all kinds of things. So anyways, we're working on that. Doug Gordon and Sarah Goodyear were on the show, the folks from the War on Cars podcast. They're talking about their book, Life After Cars, with Aaron Naparstek. They were wonderful to talk to and amazing to chat with. I'm just so happy that folks get a chance to write books and share their thoughts and feelings, and I'm really happy for them, the success of their podcast, but also just the success of this book that is really, really good. I really hope folks get a chance to pick it up if they get a chance. Yeah, at some point, I hope maybe like we can write a book, but there's too many subjects, too many topics. We've had 500 episodes. How do we narrow that down? I have no idea. I have no idea how you'd do that, or find the time for that matter. It's so much work writing a book. And that's what also impresses me about Doug and Sarah and what they did. I was also at Manny's about 2 weeks ago and recorded a show featuring Streetsblog SF editor Roger Rudick, discussing high-speed rail with the California High-Speed Rail CEO, Ian Chowdhury. That was really fascinating, interesting to hear them talk about that stuff and some of the things that they're doing to reduce costs and reduce timelines and things like that. I still wish they could do faster. I'm still very impressed by China doing 48,000 miles of high-speed rail in 20 years. I know that's a political choice, and there's obviously a lot of different things that people have told me when I say that, like the political system is different and this and that. They don't have environmental regulations like we do. Well, they may not, or may. I don't know about the specific details about Chinese environmental regulations, but that's still really impressive. I mean, come on, 48,000 miles in 20 years. Geez, we're trying to put together, 400 kilometers, 500 kilometers. So anyways, I just think that's really amazing. But also we had Ian and Roger on the show, and they had a really good conversation and got a little pushback from some readers that listened to that one. But, I think it's a good convo. We also recently chatted with Corrigan Salerno at Tea for America. Adi Tomer gave him a plug in the last episode he was on, and so we'll have Corrigan come on. He'll be on the pod to talk about some federal transportation stuff. Courtney Desir joined us at Impact. We talked to her live to talk about her work at the Connecticut State DOT, which also runs transit service for the state. Tony Jordan, as I mentioned, was at the Parking Reform Network. We'll be on. He'll talk about Donald Shoup and a bunch of other stuff. That was a really fun conversation with Tony. We even actually sat around and chatted for another hour afterwards. I turned the microphone off, but he's a good guy and really interesting to chat with. We also recorded a few younger folks doing a poster session at Impact. I'm going to try to edit it together to make it interesting for you all, but I think there's lots of really cool stuff in there, lots of interesting ideas. So we'll see if that comes out and how that might come out. But I did that too. Also, we've got scheduled discussions coming up. We've got discussions with Olivia Plotnick, who is living in China. And one of the things that I found out recently was an article she wrote about Chinese retail, which is really fascinating to me. So I wanted to chat with her about that because of my experience in some smaller Chinese cities. Addison Del Mastro of the Deleted Scenes also linked to that article that I wrote in my Substack about it too. So that was really cool. Ben Schneider is coming on the show to talk about his new book. Carter Lavin is coming on the show to talk about his book as well. If you want to win, you got to fight. The Bruntlets, Chris and Melissa Bruntlet, are probably going to come on the show. I've got their book on my desktop, and I need a few more hours to read it, of course. And so there's a few other episodes up my sleeve that I've got for the end of the year. I'm boiling something up on congestion pricing for the 1 year anniversary. So we've got lots of irons in the fire, as always. And I hope you all enjoy the shows that we've had recently as well. Before the War on Cars folks came on, there was a bunch of shows that were really interesting when we were in China that we released. They were recorded before we went to China. So in any event, I hope you all appreciate the episodes that are coming out on the Talking Headways podcast. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, and we're going to go and talk about what's up next for the news. But first off, I want to thank everybody who's ordered Bus and Bike scarves. A loyal listener ordered 5 scarves to give away at the holidays. So folks have been ordering them. People at Impact were purchasing scarves. If you'd like to order one or just get one, go to the overheadwire.com. Email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com if you want to order a large amount, 10, 15 scarves, and you need a discount, I'll get you one. The bike only knit scarves are back in stock as well. So we have bike knit scarves, we have bike lightweight scarves, and we also have the bus only scarves, which have been very popular. As always, as we note, we really thank everybody supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon, patreon.com/theoverheadwire, or buying books off the bookshop site, bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. You can buy any book you want on the bookshop site through our page, and it gives us a little, like $1 a book or 50 cents a book or something along those lines. And we really appreciate that. You can support our work there. Also, you can order our Cars or Cholesterol t-shirts or stickers or any merch that you want with that logo on it. The idea for that was collaboration between me and Richard Wazensky, who is a bike advocate in Fort Worth, Texas, bit.ly/cars or cholesterol. You can find Richard's work at Dick David Sketches on Instagram. We also strongly suggest that folks sign up for the newsletter. That's how we do our work. The newsletter is subscription based, and you can go to theoverheadwire.com and sign up for that. The newsletter, we go through 1,500 items a day, and we pull out the 40 that we think are the most interesting in 5 different categories: transportation, urban design, urban issues, environment as it pertains to cities, and research. So go check that out if you get a chance. And that's how we come up with the articles for this session. So help us out, help us decide what we're going to talk about, help us figure out what's important, and we'll share that on the show. This is episode 180. We're live and in session. And of course, if you want to listen to this podcast, you can find it wherever you find your podcasts, on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, of course, Apple Podcasts. Thank you to everyone who subscribes through podcatchers. If you're listening to this right now, you're probably listening to it because of your podcatcher. Also, I should say that if you are a Patreon subscriber, whether that's $1 a month or more, you can subscribe to the podcast through Patreon and then get rid of all the advertisements, whether that's an advertisement that pops up in your feed, in your Apple Podcasts, that's another podcast, or that's the ads that show up that are posted by Libsyn, whether that's like a car commercial or a Coke commercial or whatever it is. You can get rid of all of those ads. Now, you won't get rid of the ads like this one that I'm doing right now, or the ones that I do for other shows that are very, very similar to mine, where I trade ads with them. Last week, we had a government affairs podcast that's been advertising because we shared our ad with them and they shared their ad with us. But the other ads that are usually not too associated with our work, we will give you an option to have an off-ramp. So go to patreon.com/theoverheadwire and you can subscribe $1 a month and you can get the podcast free of advertisements overall. So we appreciate folks going over who've been doing that. I've seen a bunch of dollar signups, so I know that you all are appreciative of getting rid of advertising. All right, so here are the stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter over the last few weeks. This is the news. And as I said, sign up for the newsletter, the Overhead Wire Daily. It's almost 20 years old. In 2026, it will be 20 years old. And I cannot believe that we've been doing a newsletter for 20 years, but we have. It's a strange, strange world. Okay, first up, signal timing turned off in Houston. An unreported change in the signal timing system along Houston's Red Line light rail has led to delays on trains and service bunching. Advocates are concerned about what it means for the transit system as a whole after an anonymous transit operator pointed out the city of Houston retimed lights in downtown. Signal timing on the main light rail artery allowed the line to keep 6-minute service headways, but the changes follow a pattern of pro-car decisions made after the election of Mayor Whitmire. This was by Jacob Jordan and Nicholas Cooker in the Rice Thresher. Thank you, Rice Thresher. And then there was actually new reporting out yesterday. September 18th exchange, Metro's chief, this is from the Houston Chronicle, Metro's chief signals engineer, Fred Mills, told a colleague that the change was a quote-unquote, a political decision, not a technical decision, quote. Another Metro official, director of safety, Mohammed Borkis, replied that he wished the agency had conducted, quote, at least a basic evaluation before the change took effect on September 20th. So there's a bunch of internal documents. The Houston Chronicle asked for a Freedom of Information Act, made a request, Freedom of Information Act request, and got all these emails, and then basically figured out that it was a political decision by folks in the city at Public Works to change the light, and then they didn't actually think about the red line. Duh. This seems appropriate, but it's also kind of a pattern with the new mayor, which there was a New York Times profile on the mayor as well, and obviously he's been a controversial figure. He feels like, being centrist or falling right is the best way to be left, and which is a silly thing to me. Basically, he's just kind of giving away all of the benefits of safety on streets and things like that just to appease a couple of people. He likes to go on ride-alongs with police chiefs that tell him that, one of the first things that we learned about him after he got elected was he went on a ride-along with his police chief, and the police chief told him to get rid of all the bike lanes, and then he ended up trying to do that. So there's a trouble in that. But basically, the problem with changing the light systems and then not telling the folks at Metro, or at least not coordinating with Metro, is that you lengthen people's trip times on the line. And so there was basically news and information out that said that the travel time had jumped from 13 minutes to more than 21 minutes after the signals were the new signals were changed. So this is making a material change to people's lives just to let a few cars through an intersection. You're changing the lights. The lights are only addressing the people who are in cars, one car, 250 square feet, versus one train, which might be 1,000 square feet, but then also carries 33,000 people a day. Big deal, caught red-handed by the Houston Chronicle. Another thing I want to mention is also that New York Times article about John Whitmire. He doesn't like scooters in streets. Now, how do you remedy scooters in streets? You build bike lanes. What else does he not like? Bike lanes. He doesn't like scooters. He doesn't like bike lanes. So he doesn't really want to get anything done that actually helps people figure out how to navigate the city without a car. That's basically what it is. So anyways, I wanted to share that because that was one thing I noticed about that article that was maddening, that he was like, I hate scooters. The way to fix scooters on sidewalks is to put in bike lanes. Well, I hate bike lanes too. Then you've got a problem. Next up, commute times and sleep disorders. Scientists in Japan have now found that sleep can be impacted by housing and transportation choices. The researchers found that length of commutes and housing size can determine whether people have insomnia, which can lead to a whole host of other health problems. But the smaller housing sizes can somewhat offset with reduced but the smaller housing sizes can be somewhat offset with reduced commute times in the Tokyo study area. This was by the Osaka Metropolitan University, and this was in SciTechDaily. Interesting study. So basically, the further you live outside for a bigger house, you still have insomnia because you have so much stress from driving. That's the study finding from this research in Tokyo. Next up, 30-year program to reduce smog. A 30-year program to reduce pollution in Santiago, Chile is now paying off in better air quality. Over the last decade, hours of exposure to high levels of pollution has fallen 66%. But while particulates have been reduced, climate change-induced ozone is on the rise. This was by Maria de los Angeles Orfilia in The Guardian. BRT now on track. After 2 false starts trying to find a contractor to build a bus rapid transit project, The city of Raleigh has approved a $65 million construction contract. The 5.4-mile project includes 3.3 miles of bus lanes and 10 stations along one of the most heavily traveled bus routes in the city. It is slated to open in 2030. This was by Richard Stradling in News and Observer. Yeah, so they tried to get a contractor to build this project twice, and they had to go back to the drawing board twice, and then the third time was a charm. But it speaks to like the difficulty of building some of these transit projects because you don't have contractors or folks who are available to build them. I think part of the problem initially was that they were looking for a road contractor, but many of them were busy after rebuilding after a hurricane, and so that was part of the problem. But also just trying to get people to understand that there's a different type of project, a transit project, and a lot of that transit project is road building itself. If it's a BRT project and you're giving it dedicated lanes, but the contractors can be few and far between and hard to get if you're not targeted with your pitch. So I'd love to hear more about this project at some point in terms of what went wrong and what went right. But it's interesting to interesting to understand that it took 3 times to get a contractor just to build one BRT line. Water rights and suburban expansion. 500,000 homes in the Phoenix region are now on pause due to the Arizona Department of Water Resources finding that groundwater supplies were too limited for any future growth. With solutions and advocates that line up for and against them now falling on partisan lines, the state is grappling with what the future will look like and whether a high want of sprawling, affordable housing will drown out environmental concerns. Tony Davis in High Country News. So basically in Arizona, they have a rule that says you can't build new developments without knowing where the water is going to come from. And now that water resources are dwindling because of less rainfall in the West, this is becoming a bigger problem. And so the politics of this is messy. The folks who don't necessarily care about the way that's developed or whether people have water, they just want to keep building houses and gather the money from that, are just trying to barrel forward. Whereas there's some folks who are being very conservative about small c conservative about whether this housing boom should move forward without more water resources or without more attention paid to the amount that's needed for new subdivisions, or whether infill is the more appropriate way because there's less water used for that. So interesting discussions in Phoenix and in the West about whether housing should be built in certain parts because of the amount of water that's spent and also the amount of water that's available and dwindling. Creating a city to fight crypto noise. A community in Hood County, Texas could vote soon to create a new city in order to regulate nuisances, including noise from a nearby crypto mining operation. Fans from over 60,000 computers used to mine Bitcoin are creating a sound that residents find very unpleasant. This was by Colleen de Guzman in the Texas Tribune. Caltrain makes money generating power. Caltrain's electric trains are now making money for the agency by returning power to the electric grid through generative braking. They are expected to make $1 million a year from this process. Caltrain currently runs on 100% renewable energy created by solar and wind power generators. This was in Metro Magazine. Chinese lower-tier cities and retail. Mid-tier cities in China differ from their larger global counterparts in how retail emerges. After visiting 30 mid-tier cities in 60 days, Olivia Plotnick notes that international brands trying to gain a foothold in mid-tier cities have a hard time competing with Chinese brands, and many younger people are opting for a different kind of retail experience that connects to an online one. The sale of EVs is also a major part of upscale mall experiences. This was by Olivia Plotnick in Campaign Asia. We're going to have Olivia on the show soon. To talk about this in a little bit more detail, as well as China in general, after we've gone on our trip. But I think it's really interesting. I went to a mall where we were staying in Beijing, and it was really fascinating because there's so many different clothing type stores. There's different stores for kids with bookstores. They all have a lot of manga. There's a lot of toys. The Pop Marts have lots of stuffed animals and other characters that people really seem to love. But also, they also had electric vehicle sales. They had 2 different stalls. One was a Tesla. The other one was, I think, an Xpeng. And it's interesting to see how they've integrated into these malls, these indoor malls, which are basically these small cities on top of transit stops. And it'd be interesting to talk to Olivia about this, because when we were in other cities, there's tons of retail. And the other thing is that I think the hyperdensity actually helps a lot of this retail. Also, the hyperdensity, there's a lot more ground floor retail, which makes it super cheap and easy to start up a store. So it seemed like there's a lot of stores, there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of different things that you can find. And then it's also easy to access because you're close by and you can walk to it. So we'll discuss that with her, but I found that very interesting. We also wrote a piece on our newsletter on theoverheadwire.com, but also in our Substack copied. And it's in our Patreon. I should say that the stuff that we write on Substack is on our Patreon too. So if you're a Patreon member and you want to see what we're writing, but aren't subscribed to the newsletter, you can see the intros, not the whole newsletter, but just the intros that are longer form at Patreon. So we post those there for free. And if you're following us for free on Patreon, so there's a free tier and an extra tier. The free tier, we actually publish those two there because it comes in our intro newsletter, our basic newsletter as well, which is free too. The paid newsletter is a longer form one, and then the intro one comes every morning as well, but it's only a couple of articles, and then it has our long form thing. So you can find those on Patreon, on Substack, on our website, and in our newsletter as well. So you can find them all over the place. Everything you need to know about SB 79 by M. Nolan Gray. M. Nolan Gray marvels at the passage of SB 79, which would allow developers in California to build up to 9 stories in areas proximate to transit. The bill is being hailed as transformative, especially in YIMBY circles. But what does the bill actually allow? Observers may be interested to find a lot of nuance, such as proximity alone may not qualify, but actual access to the station area does. Nolan Gray, Arbitrary line. So Nolan is a friend of the pod. He's been on the show before, but he also wrote this wonderful, wonderful piece about what SB 79 is. Funny, the numbers in the numbers in these SBs and ABs and all the stuff that comes through California get really confusing after a time. SB 375 was a landmark environmental bill, and I keep calling this 379. So this is SB 79, not 379. Jared Walker sent me a note telling me, "Hey, Jeff, it's 79, not 379." I was like, "Oh no, okay." My brain is fried after SBs and ABs throughout the years. So, but yeah. This one allows mid-rise multifamily housing within a quarter to a half mile of subway, light rail, and rapid bus lines in California, as well as the busiest commuter rail stations. It will, basically the definition of BRT is really strict. It's not your neighborhood bus stop, but to qualify, a bus line must have a full-time dedicated bus lane and peak headways of at least 15 minutes or less, which actually is leading to many NIMBYs to fight these programs by saying, we don't want this bus line because it's going to lead to more densification, so don't give it to us, which is a really, really weird thing to do. Let's cut off our nose to spite our face. Let's make sure that people in our neighborhood don't have transportation options. These people are not serious. And there's so much other things in there. Basically, there's also some counties that were left out. I think Contra Costa County here in the Bay Area, where it has a lot of BART stations, they were left out because they didn't have a certain amount of stations that were qualifying. And then also there's a regulation that says if you're within a half mile or a quarter mile, it has to be a walking distance on actual roads. It can't just be over the ravine to the other side of the street. I guess if you built if the developer decided, I'm going to build a bridge over this ravine so that people have access, then maybe it will change. But there's a lot of little details in here, and Nolan covers all of it in great detail. So I hope folks, if they're interested, go and check it out. I'm looking forward to seeing what this does. Many other YIMBY / housing reforms, zoning reforms in California have been slow to take off. But maybe this one will make things a little faster, a little better. But there's a lot of other things that need to happen too. I mean, there's wage requirement, wage issues in California that make it hard to build construction material equipment, all the permits and things you need to get, all the just a ton of stuff. Labor, basically labor costs are expensive, etc. So let's just build housing. Let's figure it out. It's hard. We're doing these cool things, but I hope they work. Finding your city's carbon hoofprint. Researchers at the University of Michigan have mapped out carbon emissions from producing meat for specific cities around the country. They show that eating the same meal in different cities could have drastically different emissions, and the amount of meat a city consumes is not strongly tied to how many emissions a city produces. This is by Matt Davenport at the University of Michigan. So basically, they looked at a bunch of different cities and where the meat that's consumed in those cities comes from and how much emissions that meat was created to make that meat, whether that's to grow livestock, etc. And it's really fascinating because some cities have really high emissions profiles when it pertains to this, and others have really low. And it's not the ones you would think necessarily. So definitely an interesting study. Highway repair more valuable than expansion. Recent research from Good Jobs First finds that road repair spending generates more economic value than expansion. However, the United States still spends $27 billion per year expanding highways. The report also ties smart growth to stronger local economies, as well as higher construction and wage growth. This was by Chris McCahill in SSTI. This makes sense. I mean, basically, the highway system is built out. Another piece that I wrote for the newsletter basically says, talking about China's high-speed rail again, is that we've built out our China's discussing right now if they've built out their high-speed rail system, and I think maybe they've gotten close. But we've also built out our highway system, right? So we're connected everything, and so there needs to be a discussion about whether the highway system is complete, and maybe we shouldn't spend $27 billion a year expanding them, and then start building a high-speed rail network that makes different connections in cities and actually has a higher economic benefit value to it. The repair actually has more value in this instance than expanding highway. And so maybe we should follow that rule when we're thinking about federal transportation bills. Don't export U.S. car safety standards. A number of European cities and civil society organizations are warning that a trade deal with the United States that accepts lower vehicle safety standards risks improvements in road safety and leadership in public health. EU vehicle standards have supported a 36% reduction in road deaths since 2010, while the United States has seen an increase of 30%. This is by Transport and Environment. Basically, they're trying to fight against the trade deals and the tariff deals and stuff like that, where Trump is trying to allow larger vehicles to be in European cities. So those huge trucks, huge SUVs, huge vehicles. And so they're not allowed right now because of the safety implications. And the interesting part of this is that the administration is trying to push this through in a trade deal, but the EU and other folks in the EU who are worried about the safety of people on the roads are concerned and are pushing back. Giving up equity for long-term community. The Douglas Community Land Trust in Washington, D.C. has put together a program that allows home sellers to keep homes affordable into the future. In order to achieve that, homeowners will need to sell homes to the land trust below market value up to 25%. But once the home is sold to the land trust, new buyers purchase under a new structure that creates a 99-year ground lease and keeps it more affordable long-term. This is by Alaire Conti in Realtor.com. Basically, a land trust. They sell their property to a land trust at a discounted price, and then the land trust can keep that property affordable in perpetuity because the land underneath is not part of the sale of the house. Future traffic deaths by autonomous vehicles. In a surprisingly candid moment for a technology CEO, the head of Waymo admitted she believes that society will accept when one of their vehicles kills someone as part of the trade-off for what many believe are safer vehicles in the long run. But after a Waymo vehicle illegally passed a school bus in Georgia without receiving a $1,000 ticket, the question of who is responsible when something happens still lingers. This was by Sharon Adarlo in Futurism. And so basically the CEO of Waymo basically was asked the question about whether the public is actually prepared for a Waymo to cause somebody's death. And then basically her answer was, I think that society will. I think the challenge for us is making sure that society has a high enough bar on safety that companies are held to. So it's not as alarming as the title of the article. Futurism is basically like Waymo chief says Americans will accept death, which is kind of true, but it's also more nuanced than that. So I wanted to be fair to the story. But at some point, one of these autonomous vehicles will kill somebody. It's just, the Cruise vehicle almost got somebody. Obviously, Uber and Elaine Herzberg happened a number of years ago in Arizona. Elaine Herzberg was killed by the Uber self-driving test vehicle that was driven by a test driver. It's already happened, but it hasn't happened to Waymo yet. And so it's interesting to think about what might happen when that happens, which is sad to think that it will happen and when it happens and who it happens to, somebody who's right now living somewhere. And so I think that there's a bigger discussion around this about, how we accept death on the roads and streets of the United States from drivers, but also from, vehicles, and whether we should accept that, whether that needs to be as part of the discussion. If these autonomous vehicles are safer, why are they safer? How are they safer? And what's the cost of being safe? And to the folks who believe that these cars will be something that is part of our lives in the future and much safer than human drivers, what is the cost of allowing these vehicles on our roads in cities where they are most quote unquote successful? The places where these cars and Ubers and stuff work best are in dense urban cities where we have transit systems that could get us places fast if we move the cars out of the way. So there's that question too. Also, my big thing with these autonomous vehicles, autonomous robo-taxis, et cetera, Waymos, whatever you call them, is that they're so empty part of the time, and they're just driving around without a person. So you're spending 250 square foot of property in the city, valuable city land, to move a vehicle with nobody in it. So you're robo-taxiing air around. The safety aspect, it seems like it's a good argument, but there's so many things to discuss about these things, but I found this article interesting. Better census data on housing. The U.S. Census Bureau's new address count listing files now provide the most accurate, timely, and granular data ever in the nation's housing stock. The data, which is available from January 2023, is released every 6 months and offers a jurisdiction-level number on change in housing units. Previous to the ACLF, incomplete local surveys and reporting gaps led to very inaccurate data. This was by Alex Armlovich at the Niskanen Center, I should say. Interesting. Yeah, so a lot of data sources are being shut down. The Trump administration is trying to get rid of as much data as possible that tells them things they don't want to hear. They're trying to get rid of the employment data. They're trying to get rid of the BLS data. They're trying to get rid of the census. They don't like all the stuff that tells them that their ideas aren't right. And so I wonder if this will be one of the data sets that they'll go after. Maybe not, but it's interesting that we have this data set and we can use it to actually now figure out in a more accurate way how many housing places are building. And then maybe there's some accountability with that, right? We need to build more housing, obviously. And maybe there needs to be more accountability with how much housing we're building. And now we have a data set that tells us specifically whether cities are failing or winning at building housing. The secret to Norway's electric vehicle success. Norway's success at getting more people to adopt electric vehicles has been a rousing success, with over 80% of new cars sold in 2022 being electric. The success is due to a clear and long-term policy strategy starting in the 1990s that focused on making polluting vehicles pay more taxes, creating more economic incentives such as reduced road tolls and bus lane exemptions as well. With the success of passenger vehicles, now the program will move along to other vehicle types. This was by Georgia Collins and Energy Digital. It's interesting because right now China is actually in their 5-year plan. So China does these 5-year plans apparently, where they plan out the economic future of the country and the politics of it all put together. It's like a party platform almost, but they start to think about what they're going to do in the next 5 years. And one of the things that they've discussed is that they're not going to be creating incentives for electric vehicles because they have so many of them and they have so many companies that are building electric vehicles and the market is saturated. And so it's interesting to see that with what's going on in Norway is that in Norway, they've gotten to a point where electric vehicles are the game. And in China, they've gotten to a point where electric vehicles are saturated in the market. And so now will they take away all their subsidies and try to focus on other things that are important to them? Obviously, the United States is not there yet. We don't have saturation in the electric vehicle market. It's hard for us to get it off the ground. We are trying to. And also there's another question about whether we should be subsidizing $7,500 a vehicle versus giving people electric bikes. California just pulled back its electric bike program in order to give more money to the electric vehicle program, which is silly because electric bikes are just more efficient, especially to reduce VMT. But it's interesting to see these other countries who have been successful in adopting electric vehicles and what their next 5-year plans, 10-year plans are going to look like and what they're going to subsidize. Okay, I got a couple of bonus items here as well. Those are the main items. These are the bonus items. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. The average price of a new vehicle topped $50,000 for the first time ever, according to Cox Automotive. This was in CNBC. The secret to big Vancouver, BC reaching higher ridership recovery rates than many other North American transit agencies is service frequencies and high densities around transit stops. This was in Bloomberg City Lab. A new report has found that bike sharing in Europe drives 305 million euro in local economic benefits to communities through job creation and reduced congestion. This was in Cities Today. Cell phone data reveals that short trips in Boston are undercounted and account for 21% of all trips around the city. Researchers have found that an equity division in who walked and biked short distances versus who took transit for longer time periods. This was in Tech Explorer. I want to know about this a little bit more, actually, in terms of like the data on trips people take. Because if this is true, we've probably been misreading our trips all this time. We probably undercount very important trips, especially since we've been using journey to work data, which is a single trip. But we've been undercounting a bunch of trips, and I think it's frustrating. If we have more accurate data, we can start to plan our transportation systems to be more efficient for us. A new law allows Milwaukee to tow and impound any vehicle that is found to be driven recklessly. Previously, the city wasn't allowed to tow vehicles that had reckless driving citations. This was in Urban Milwaukee, our friends at Urban Milwaukee. Yeah, and there was an article that probably be very popular in the next Monday show. California is really lax on DUIs and allows people to get back on the road almost right away without punishment, without substantive punishment. They get a fine or they might go to get some, they might get jail time, but maybe not. And it's frustrating. And it's interesting to see this in Milwaukee where they can basically take away the vehicles from reckless drivers. I think they should probably do that with DUIs too. If somebody has, like in California, there's somebody who had 16 DUIs and the judge still let her off, didn't put her in jail for like 20 years for having so many driving while drunk infractions. That's ridiculous. Urban farms in St. Louis have kept 100 million gallons of water out of aging sewer systems during rainfall events, protecting the Mississippi River. In 2016, St. Louis was one of the cities with the largest sewer overflows in the country, releasing 200 million gallons of wastewater into the river instead of treating it. This has been reasons to be cheerful. And finally, a demonstration of reduced emissions from building with stone suggests that stone buildings have just 3% of the emissions as steel and reinforced concrete buildings. Even when using carbon-intensive methods to extract stone, it still beats other materials by far in emissions. This is in the BBC. So basically, maybe we should start building stone buildings now, but the problem is maybe getting the stone out of the earth in big enough quantities to build these stone buildings. But interesting to hear that it's so much less emissions because the stone's already there. The emissions were already created when they got crushed because tectonic plates and movements and the formation of rivers and whatever else. So interesting to find that out. All right, that's it for the news. This week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without it, so thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note, as well as a cool train station stamp on the letter that I send to you, and $10 a month will get you a transportation scarf. Also, you can get, at $1 a month or more, you can get this podcast and Talking Headways ad-free. Listener questions and comments, feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. If you have a comment or question, feel free to tweet us or follow us on LinkedIn or wherever and comment on any time we post these things, and we'll read it out on the air. Or if you ask us not to, we don't have to do that as well. We can just read it and then send you a nice note back. I appreciate everybody who emails in who says, well, don't put this on the air, or the folks that do and say, yeah, sure, that'd be great. So thank you for sending in emails. Thank you for sending in notes. And that means that you're listening and engaged and really following along with what we're talking about and care about the subject matter, whether it's something that we agree on or not. So appreciate that a lot. Puppies and Butterflies this is part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe just didn't fit in the other sections. I'm really just having a ton of fun going to conferences every year that I get to go. Impact is the one that I've been going to the last few years. Before that, previously, I would go to NECTO, I'd go to CNU, I'd go to the Shared Use Mobility Summit. It's just fun to go to conferences. I went to, in 2019, I think it was, I went to APA Midwest and did a live podcast there. That was really fun. So if you wanted me to come and do a podcast at your conference, let me know. But also, it's just a really great way to get out of kind of the minutia of the day-to-day and see old friends and meet new friends and learn new things. And I can't say enough about conferences. Just like for young people who are starting out, conferences are the best. Just going to conferences, meeting new people, making new friends. There's always a young group of people that are going to these conferences that start to make friends and get together and grow up together and then become, basically leaders eventually. I know the folks that I went to the first time I went to CNU in 2005, a lot of those folks are doing some amazing things. I've had some of them on the show recently to talk about whether they're doing development projects. One of my really good friends from that CNU, Mike Lydon, is basically the poobah of tactical urbanism. And so, there's really a lot to gain from going to these conferences and hanging out. And it's just, for me, at least now, it's not always about the sessions. Well, those are great and everything, but just seeing old friends, talking shop, learning new things by drinking some soda or beer or something, chatting in the hallway, hanging out and chatting for the podcast, for example. That's just super fun to get scheduling, trying to schedule people. Even if people didn't come, I had a guest that I wanted to have come on the show, but couldn't come on the show that I just got to chat with for a while, which was really great too, meet a new person. So anyways, I really highly recommend going to conferences. You can find them. The ones I mentioned are really good for transportation set. There's also local APA chapters. There's local gatherings of people. The Parking Reform Network party that was in Portland was really fun. It's just super great. So I highly recommend it. I really am so glad I got to see some old friends and meet new ones, and just conferences, man. It's really cool. So you can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course, at my website, theoverheadwire.com, and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the newsletter. And on Flickr, we can be found at Transit Nerds. Everything else is at The Overhead Wire. Thanks for joining us at Mondays at The Overhead Wire, and thanks to our generous patrons for sponsoring this week's podcast. Thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you sooner this time, the next time.